right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as we get you ready for another edition of Football at 4. A lot of football to dive into today with John McMullen at JF McMullen, and he joins me now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Johnny Mac, what's up, my man?
Not much. How are you, Mike?
All is well. Now that we're under the 10 days, I am starting to kind of get into that mode where I'm excited about the NFL draft. I didn't feel like I was into the draft. Now I feel like I'm starting to get excited about the possibilities, some of the things that could happen. And I find, like, after we talked a little draft yesterday, that I'm kind of there. So let me ask you, number one, this particular draft overall, what are you hearing about the depth of this draft and how good of a class this is?
As usual, depends on position, wide receiver. Some people have used that term, historical, as far as the depth. And there are a lot of good receivers with upside that you probably could get in the second round. And even deeper, I mean, Eric DeCosta, who's the Ravens GM, really highly regarded GM as well, said you could probably get a starter in the fifth round, which I think there was a little hyperbole there. And you never know. Obviously, you always hit on players later in the draft, but I wouldn't count on it is what I'm saying. Wide receiver's great. Offensive tackle, a lot of guys who potentially could go first round. So that's pretty deep, at least at the top of the draft. And then you look at some other positions, edge rusher being the most notable. If you're looking for an edge rusher, you better have the second pick or you're not probably going to get a good one.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's look at the needs of the Eagles, safety, corner. Let's start with the safety. I know you wrote about that at Sports Illustrated. The safety position and what the Eagles have and what this draft might be able to get them. Are they in a good spot if you need a safety in this particular draft?
Talking about potential first-round picks, no. I think they could. And that a lot of that has to do with how the Eagles themselves value the position. They don't value it dramatically, so it would have to be a head changer, a guy who's going to make you turn and say, wow. And I don't think there's anybody in that type of position where they would consider 21. But there's a lot of good safeties in the second round of the draft that could potentially be there. That could be better than what the Eagles have. And the Eagles have made a pretty clear-cut plan at safety, but I've kind of mentioned it on the show before. Hey, it might be a clear plan, but you're going to trust Rodney McLeod and Jalen Mills and Will Parks? I don't know. If an Antoine Winfield Jr. is there in the second round, I think you would have to seriously consider and there's a number of names that could be there starting in the second, even the third round, if somebody like Jeremy Chin would start to drift a little bit. So I do think safety is possible in the premium rounds. I don't necessarily think it's possible in the first round.
Yeah, you have Delpit as your top safety. Most people do. Is he a option at 21, or you just mentioned that you don't think safety in the first round, but if you were going to get one, would he be the name that would be called? Is Winfield possibly an option there either, or both those guys not first rounders?
Well, most people have Delpit around the league as a first rounder. I would say most people have Winfield as a second rounder because there's some size deficiencies, much like his father, but they didn't learn from his father, who was a great player. Despite those size deficiencies.
Was his father a corner?
His father was a corner, yeah.
Gotcha.
So a little bit of difference, but, he's got a lot of the same traits as his dad. I just talked about his dad today because people were talking about him. Someone speculated Miami might consider Antoine Winfield Jr. in the first round, late in the first round, one of their picks. And we'll see how that shakes out. But his father was just a tremendous run support corner that you just never see in the modern game. And Winfield has a lot of that from the safety position. He's a good tackler. He's fundamental, which you don't see a lot in this league. And he's got some ball skills. So I think ultimately if you did take him at 21, you'd be very, very happy. But I don't think you have to take him at 21. It's one of those deals.
Those are the two guys that really, I mentioned is 21, but you got Xavier McKinney, Kyle Duggar, Davis from California. You mentioned Chin. Brandon Jones, Texas. I've seen him play in the Big 12. Big 12, we were laughing yesterday with Harrison Hand that he got out of Baylor, and he's lucky because, Baylor and defense just don't go hand in hand. At least he's at Temple. You get a shot playing corner at Temple as opposed to in the Big 12. But overall, do you think safety is an option for the Eagles in round 2?
Yeah, I definitely think it is in that type of situation where you get to that, and you mentioned a number of positions. I think safety would be one of them. I think linebacker would be one of them. I think corner would be one of them. Once you get past that first-round pick, where I think there's some limitations on how you're built. And, obviously the first one to come to mind would be wide receiver. There are a few other positions as well. But we know how the Eagles think, and most likely they're not going to take a safety or a linebacker in the first round of the draft unless they're wowed by the player. So that means you have to start filling the needs in the second, third, fourth round. And once you get to that point, you can go to your board and say, okay, who is the best of that triumvirate where we are in the pick, and that's how you sort of go about it. And talked about it last week and said best player available is the term everybody throws out. What that really means is best player available at the positions you need help at. And that's how the Eagles will go about it.
NFL Draft 9 days away. Listen to it live on 97.3 ESPN. John McMullen's with us at JF McMullen on Twitter. We're looking at the draft. All right, you looked at the safeties there. The Eagles, by the way, their pick is 53 in the second round. That third-round pick with number 85, they sent that to Detroit in the Slay deal. So now they have a bottom of the third round compensatory pick, number 103. So they have 21, 53, 103. Let me get your take then. If we all kind of agree, and I think most of us would say, 95% of the audience would say, wide receivers 21. All right, safety. What about corner at 53? Do you like the crop of corners, and are they in play at 21 and 53?
Well, they are in play. There's no question about that. But when you talk about the first round specifically, I think, that's the linchpin. Let's be honest. And, yes, wide receiver. And I did sort of my yearly odds column at Sports Illustrated as well on how the Eagles will potentially go at 21. So I encourage everyone to check that out. But, there's really four receivers. We all know the top three. C.D. Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs. They're not going to be there at 21. It's as simple as that. So then you say, is Justin Jefferson good enough to go at number 21? Well, the Eagles may never get to make that decision. There's a lot of people who say it's just a slot receiver. If you listen to the late rumblings, he's probably going to go before 21 as well. So then if you're the Eagles and all four are off the board, what do you do at that point? Mm-hmm. I would try to trade down. I wouldn't take a Denzel Mims. I certainly wouldn't take a Brandon Ayuk or any of the other receivers, Jalen Reagor, or somebody who could be in that type of situation, but you'd be reaching for it. And we talked about the depth of the class. You don't have to reach in this class. So you can trade back and regain some of those assets you gave up to get Darius Slay, for instance. Now, however, while I say that, the part people don't think about it is somebody's got to be willing to come up if you want to move down. So you have to have two to tango, so to speak. You got to find a dance partner to trade and move down. So a lot is going to be dependent on what happens at 21. And obviously, if you have to go at a different position, that's going to have a ripple effect down in the draft. But Yeah, if somebody goes, if it goes conventional the way we think it's going to go, it's going to be a receiver. Yeah, corner would be in that situation. C.J. Henderson's not going to be there. He's going to be a top 15 pick.
If we were having this conversation 2 or 3 weeks ago, he was an option at 21.
Yeah, probably not any longer. There's a lot of people in this league think he's the best corner on the board, which is shocking since he's kind of risen. A.J. Terrell, maybe.
I like this. He's risen. What's he on, Zoom? Is he faster on Zoom or Microsoft Teams than the other guy?
And by the way, that means nobody rises. Most teams stack their boards, and all the talk about late risers just means more information. In other words, NFL scouts think certain ways about players, and certain players they think more of what I would call draft Twitter. So it's not necessarily like NFL people are saying, oh, this guy's all of a sudden top 15 pick. Mm-hmm. It's just they always had him as a top 15 pick, and people are starting to find that out. So that's sort of the difference when you hear about risers late. Yeah. It's just people getting more information. So you start to look at the corners who could be there, Trevon Diggs, maybe Stefan's brother. Maybe he could fall. A.J. Terrell, as I mentioned, although I doubt he would fall that far. But, I often talk about it. There's 32 picks in the first round. And if you go around what I just said, draft Twitter, you got 50 first-round picks, according to everybody. This guy's a first-round pick. This guy's a first-round pick. So one of those guys is going to fall.
And the interesting thing is, all right, Mel Kiper just put out his latest mock draft, and you just talked about it. Like, all of a sudden, things are all C.J. Henderson. He's got under the 12 spot. Justin Jefferson, who's in every Eagle mock draft you've ever seen. He's at 15, and guess what? Who fell down to 21 all of a sudden is Henry Ruggs III. So how does it change all of a sudden that Ruggs, there's no way he's getting there, and all of a sudden it's like, not that his mock draft is gospel by any sorts, but it's just a projection of what area of the draft that guy might fall, and Ruggs two days ago was not getting to 21.
Well, similar to what I just said, you start getting better information, more information. A lot of the GMs are going to talk. Howie's going to talk, I think, at some point this week. And all around the league, you start to get a better feel for the way people are thinking, the way they stack their board. So, like I said, it's just more information. I don't think, at some point you start ticking down the board and you say, how many teams need wide receivers? And somebody's got to get pushed down. Ultimately, I do think it is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's still going to be Lamb, number 1. Still going to be Judy, 2. Still going to be Ruggs, 3. Still going to be Jefferson, 4. Mm-hmm. Where I am, though, is none of them are going to reach 21. And that's a concern for the Eagles because the Eagles don't want to move up. They don't want to move up. They don't want to give up any more draft capital. And in fact, if anything, they want to get more back. And I don't know if one of those 4 guys are going to be there. And a lot of people hope Jefferson isn't going to be there because for whatever reason, people that have never seen him play have projected he's only a slot receiver. And, hey, the guy ran a 4.4. I mean, that's pretty fast for just a slot receiver.
Sure is. As we're kind of looking today, we talked about the safety and the corner spot. I know you have been very, I don't want to say bullish, but the fact that the Eagles' linebacking core is maybe the worst in all of the NFL. How about the linebackers in this class and 53? Is that a marriage?
Well, I think, for the first time since 1979, you got to put into the equation the Eagles might take a linebacker in the first round of the draft. All-fall linebacker. They did take Marcus Smith a couple years ago, but he was really an edge rusher. So they haven't taken a middle linebacker, weak side linebacker since Jerry Robinson in 1979. After a very long time. And it doesn't mean as much as it says on the surface because obviously the same guy isn't taking all those picks for those 40-plus years. But you do recognize the modern NFL doesn't value that position as much. But I mentioned if all four of those receivers are off the board, you can't find a trade partner. You can't trade down to maybe take a different receiver later in the first round. You got to take somebody. And that's where Daniel Jeremiah kind of raised people's eyebrows, former Eagle scout, still very close with the organization. In his latest mock draft, he switched to Kenneth Murray, the linebacker from Oklahoma. I haven't, I'll get to talk to Howie Roseman and Andy Waddle at some point this week. I think I'll get a better feel for how the Eagles are thinking after that discussion. But I do think you have to at least note that Jeremiah went in that direction and at least start talking about linebacker in the first round. If not, you're definitely talking about it in the second and third round. They have to get a linebacker at some point in a premium round, a guy who can help right away. And it's got to happen at some point. That they just cannot move forward with what they have.
It must happen. It has to happen. Now, are you talking about your classic 4-3 middle linebacker, or are you talking about, a more of an outside linebacker who is these safety hybrid types?
Well, there's nobody wants the classic 4-3 downhill linebacker. I mean, nobody's looking for that. You are looking for a guy who can excel in both aspects of the true modern 3-down linebacker that can play in coverage and also be hold up and run support. So I don't think they're looking for that hybrid player. They already have that, Nate Gary, who was a safety at Nebraska. They need more.
Very popular player, too.
Yeah, very popular, as I know firsthand. Very popular player. But the Eagles like him. The Eagles like him a lot, and that's all that matters. So they need more of the Nigel Bradham type. That's who they need to replace. That's who was the other 3-down linebacker. And they need a bigger, stronger, more physical guy. And that's what Murray is, but he would project as a much higher ceiling as far as athletically. But that's the type of linebacker they need.
I guess, since we're on this defensive side, and 53 seems to be our point of conversation, Chase Young's the best. Any name at 53 that you would say, I like that guy? There's a bunch of guys that, as you get to this point, you're like, man, if he was there, I'd like him there. Are there guys like that for the 53 spot? I guess, 85 could be in play for an edge rusher too, but 53 would seem more of a guy that could help you now.
Yeah, but it's a bad year for edge rushers. And you're going to see, because it's probably the second most valuable position in the league behind quarterback, the old adage, you either get the quarterback or get to the quarterback. That's what people in the NFL say. So Chase Young is great, best player in this draft. It's going to go number 2 overall. And then after that, you're going to have guys go in the first round. And probably in most years wouldn't be first-round picks. So A.J. Epinesa is going to go in the first round. The kid from Penn State might go in the first round. K'Lavon Chasen's probably going to go top 20. He shouldn't be going top 20. And by the way, he would be in the equation to go 21 to the Eagles. And, find the nearest bridge and jump off it if they're going to go that and pick that. I mean, that's an undersized guy. And by the way, 5 years from now, I might say something different. After he builds himself up, he might become a really, really good NFL player. But he's going to get pushed around early. You're going to have some growing pains. That's not to say you can't get through it. But if you're looking for an immediate contributor, and you are at 21, I would not want that guy.
Well,
but guys are going to get pushed up the board. That's the problem.
On that front, then, they drafted a couple of guys. Josh Sweat, was a project guy a couple of years ago. Well, now he's going into the third year. I feel like there was another guy in that mold that was like an undersized. Oh, they traded for the guy, Avery. Are they in play?
Gennard Avery.
Yeah, are they in play for roles? Josh Sweat seemed like he came on a little bit later on at the end of last year. He's going to his, like, what, fourth year now?
Yeah, I mean, Josh Sweat, he's supposed to take that next step, and he took that step to be a rotational defensive end. Now he's got to step up and be the third guy to replace Vinny Curry. And you know, the concerns, Josh Sweat is the exact opposite of what I just explained. Josh Sweat is a NFL defensive end physically. I mean, length, he's 6'4", 6'5", 270. He just looks like an NFL defensive end. And he at one time was one of the top recruits in the nation when he went to Florida State, just had a horrible injury. So when you say project, he was a project from the injury standpoint. Because it was such a catastrophic knee injury, no one knew what level he would get at. But as far as skills, he's got everything you could possibly want to succeed. And that's what I'm saying. If you had a Josh Sweat completely healthy, who never had that injury in this draft, he'd be a top 10 pick. That's what an edge rusher looks like in the NFL. There aren't a lot of these guys in this draft, absent Chase Young, and guys are going to push and guys are going to reach. And everybody else, I would say there's one guy in this draft who is a no doubt about it first-round pick on the edge. And I think 4 might go in the first round because of the position.
It's funny, we're going to have a lot of good draft conversation this week during Football at 4, so keep it locked. We got people texting in great questions and stuff that we'll try to throw John's way throughout the week here for our Football at 4. You know, you got people saying, I wouldn't mind if they move back, pick up a late first, early second because of their second-round pick being 53, if they can get some more ammunition because of the positions that they need. And as you just laid out, John, it almost sounds like moving back is almost the most attractive option for them based on their needs and what's in this draft class.
Yeah, I mean, based off really the Darius Slade trade, they want to, as I said, they want to add more assets because they're coming off 2 consecutive years where they've only had 5 picks. And Howie's been pretty honest about
They've got 8
saying,
right now, right? 8?
Yeah, and they had 10 to start, but they had to give up 2 of them to get Slay. So if anything, he'd like to add more than subtract. But that's the thing with Howie. He can he stay disciplined? It's what I wrote about. That's his plan as we sit here today. He wants to be disciplined. He doesn't want to move up. But if somebody he likes starts coming down the board, starts slipping a little bit, I don't know if he can control himself. And he might give up more to go get him. So a lot of it depends on what player he wants, who does he really, really want. And if that player, you just mentioned Henry Ruggs, let's use him as an example. If he does start to slip to 17, 18, do the Eagles revisit it and say, okay, he's in range, let's go get him? That's a possibility as well. But if you look at Howie's history, he's generally going to move either up or down or around. He just tends not to twiddle his thumbs. And look at the last 2 years. He went up to get Andre Dillard. The year before that, he went down from 32. That was the Lamar Jackson pick, but understandably, the Eagles weren't going to take Lamar Jackson. And then he went back up because Dallas Goedert was the player he wanted. So that's his history. So when we do start talking about the aftermath of this, it's probably going to be not 21. It's going to go up or it's going to go down.
John McMullen, Football at 4. We do it every day. We'll do it again tomorrow. And there's a lot of great draft talk this week as we are 9 days away from the NFL draft. Things are starting to move. Things are starting to change. We'll look back at the top of the draft tomorrow where some things are certainly starting to shake up a little bit as well. Johnny Mac, good to have you, pal.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Johnny Mac, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.